Welcome to episode 5 of the LibreOffice and Free and Open Source Software podcast. I'm Mike Saunders from the Document Foundation, the small nonprofit organization that coordinates the LibreOffice project and community. In the last 4 episodes, we've talked about marketing, design, QA, quality assurance, and documentation in the LibreOffice project and in the wider open source world as well. But today we're talking about another topic, accessibility in LibreOffice free and open source software. So accessibility being a topic that's not always doesn't get the most attention, but is actually really, really important as well. So I'm joined by my colleague at the Document Foundation, Michael Weghorn. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Mike.
How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Michael has been involved in LibreOffice for many years, but recently joined the Document Foundation team as a developer. So historically, we haven't really had many developers at TDF, although we can all develop a bit, but we've been focused on coordinating the community. But Michael joined recently to work on accessibility topics to improve LibreOffice's accessibility. But that's quite a broad term in itself. What does accessibility actually mean, Michael, and what makes software accessible?
Yes, accessibility means that software is usable by as many users as possible, in particular by people with certain kinds of disabilities. Like accessibility, I think, is pretty well known in the real world. When you think of people with wheelchairs, for example, and then it's important that roads or sidewalks can be used by them as well. And it's similar in the digital world, where people with disabilities have special needs as well. So it's important for software to be designed in a way that's usable by everyone.
Yeah. So what are some of these disabilities or features you say some people have that makes the software difficult to use, or whether software needs to be adapted? I mean, one famous example is blind people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it always amazes me that blind people can use software so well if the app has good accessibility. Yeah, you talk to somebody online, you're exchanging messages with somebody or on Bugzilla, and then later you find out that they're blind, but have been communicating and writing all along and using the software, and you think, wow, that's amazing. So yeah, I guess visual impairment is one thing, but what else is there that can make software inaccessible?
Yeah, there's a wide range of disabilities. For example, also motor disabilities, people who can't use their hands or input devices as other people might be able to do it, for example. So there are like two aspects to help people with disabilities. One is for the software to be really usable. There's also special hardware, like special input devices, for example, people who don't use a normal mouse, but would use a joystick, for example. There are also devices tracking eye movement, for example. So it's quite a wide range of special input devices. There are also output devices, for example, braille devices that would output a text in braille, really, like these hardware devices are there. And then it's important really for software to handle this kind of input very well, and also to be robust for all this kind of assistive technology. So in every single operating system or platform, like Linux, Windows, or Mac OS, there's a particular specification of how the interaction between an application and those assistive technology like screen readers works. So it's important for an application to really support that well. But there are also very many other aspects that are not directly tied to that specification. But for example, high contrast is one important thing. So if you have light gray text on white background, that's very bad to read for everyone. Improving the contrast there really helps everyone. There's the Web Content Accessibility Guideline is kind of the de facto standard for most applications or for most areas when it comes to digital accessibility. It really describes certain kinds of aspects that really are important for applications to take into account. Another example. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go on.
Another example, for example, would also be people who are sensitive to motion. Like in old days, it was kind of common for ads on the web to have flashing input or so, which is annoying for many, but really for some people it can have a serious impact. So they can really suffer from that pretty badly. So it's important to support disabling any motion like that or any animation effects.
Yeah, I remember when Linux window managers with wobble effect and it's a Unix window managers, not beyond Linux, but there was one, I think it was called Project Looking Glass, and it was like a cube as well spinning around. Your virtual desktop was on a cube, and I was using it, and it made me feel sick as well. So I thought it might look cool, but it's not a great idea. And yeah, I guess as accessibility is important so that everybody can use the software, even if they have certain limitations or have some things differently. But it's also a legal requirement, I believe, in some places as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is, absolutely. Like in the US, there's, for example, the ADA, Americans with Disability Act. In Europe, just recently, I think in July, the European Accessibility Act came into force, which really like requires certain criteria to be met, and there are fines that apply if it's not, like if they're not met. So it's also a legal requirement. These are just two examples. There are similar legislation elsewhere. As I mentioned before, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That's usually the technical, which describes the technical things that need to be implemented. That's pretty much the same everywhere. And then the legal framework is kind of based on that technical foundation usually.
Right, yeah. And although I'm not really a developer, I try to keep an eye on lots of different things in the LibreOffice project, and it strikes me as well that when you add a feature, bearing in mind accessibility, then there are lots of different things you have to think about. It's easy to add a feature and say, well, we'll add a keyboard shortcut like here, control, and then on the other side of the keyboard. But if you've got limited capacity to move, or you can only use one hand, then these giant keyboard shortcuts, and so many things like that as well. Tooltips, I guess. So a screen reader can go over icons and tell you what they do, or read a description in tooltips. So yeah, it's it's easy to add a feature often, but then to actually really fully implement it with good documentation, APIs, and of course accessibility is obviously more work, but really important. So how do you think LibreOffice actually stands at the moment in terms of accessibility? Where is it good? Where does it need improvement as well?
Yeah, I think that in general, I would say there are two main aspects to accessibility in LibreOffice. One is that the user interface itself is usable well by everyone. For example, also by screen reader users. And another aspect is, I would say, accessibility of the documents that are created in LibreOffice. For example, if a user inserts an image in LibreOffice and then exports the document to PDF, then it's important that even people who can't see the image have some way to perceive what the image is about. So LibreOffice, for example, offers a way to insert a text alternative description that would then be read out by screen readers when people use a PDF viewer for the document. So I'd say that are the two main aspects. And LibreOffice has the means to provide those accessibility descriptions and metadata. There's even a PDF UA export feature. A PDF UA stands for PDF Universal Accessibility. So that is a standard to make PDF documents accessible. And that's required in quite some countries, in particular for governments and public administrations. So LibreOffice does support that. And there's also a so-called accessibility checker that can explicitly be used to check a document whether there are any problems with accessibility. For example, if there are images in there that don't have an alternative text description, or if the contrast is bad, or if people use hard formatting, like don't use paragraph styles for headings, for example, but manually format the text is bold and use larger font. While it might look the same at first glance, it's just on the semantic level, the information gets lost. Like assistive technology would be able to identify the structure of the document, or the PDF viewer, the document viewer would expose that information, and then assistive technology, for example, has the feature to jump to the next heading. And also when you like see the structure of the document, it's also helpful for people without disabilities, of course. Like if you have a PDF viewer or use the navigation in LibreOffice, it's very helpful to know how the document is structured and to see, oh, there are like 5 top level headings, and then you can navigate easily, for example.
Yeah, another example of the importance of styles instead of direct
Yes,
formatting.
exactly.
We always say where you see people pressing space to move text around instead of centering, or control B to bold certain letters and certain words and make their own headlines. I guess one of the challenges in accessibility as well, working on it, is that you've got some things that LibreOffice needs to provide, but many accessibility tools and features are provided by the operating system. But then LibreOffice works on Linux, Mac OS, Windows, Haiku OS, and a lot of smaller ones as well, the BSDs. Is it then challenging to ensure accessibility when some things you have to do in the app, but it also, so a lot of the time, we get messages from people saying, well, why can't LibreOffice read out documents or something? And I say, well, that's normally a feature of the operating system. It's not the job of the Office suite to do that. Would be reinventing the wheel if every app had its own way to read out text. So that's really should be provided by the operating system. But is it difficult making LibreOffice work on these different platforms with the same accessibility features?
Yes, it certainly sometimes is. I think that's more like for the first aspect when it comes to the user interface. For the aspect of the document accessibility that I was talking about before, there are standards of how things need to be like implemented, or how they need to be specified in a document. For example, the PDF standard and the PDF UA standard I mentioned before. So if LibreOffice properly implements that, then PDF viewers should be doing whatever is needed to make it accessible to assistive technology, for example. Yes, on the different platforms, there are, as I mentioned before, they have a specification of how these accessibility properties should be exposed or should be made available. For example, on Linux, that protocol is called ATSBI. On Windows, there is iAccessible2 or UIA. And on macOS, there's NS accessibility. So in general, there is a clear specification of how content should be made accessible. In reality, it's not always as clear why something doesn't work when it doesn't work. So for example, why one of the assistive technology, like a screen reader, doesn't speak text, even though it is available, even though LibreOffice does implement what the specification says. So in practice, it's indeed sometimes necessary to inspect the whole stack, so to see what does LibreOffice implement, and also what does the assistive technology, like a screen reader, expect, and even everything in between in the software stack in between. For example, on Linux, we use so-called UI toolkits or libraries as well, which are software components that provide some of the functionality. So we can make use of those. But sometimes it's really necessary to check, what does LibreOffice do? What does this UI toolkit do? What does the other library or software component do that translates from the UI toolkit to the platform accessibility layer? And then what does the screen reader consume or expect? So in fact, all of these can be, or all of these are involved, and the problem can be anywhere. So I've actually been contributing to multiple of these projects, and I'm very thankful that it's really a good cooperation with people from all of these projects. I've received a lot of help and input, so I'm really, really thankful. for that. But indeed, sometimes it's not really instantly clear where the problem is if something doesn't work right away.
It does sound challenging, yeah, but it's good to hear that upstream from these projects are collaborating well, yeah. So I guess that's one of the things you're working on. What are some of the other tasks and projects you're working on or have been working on recently?
Yeah, I've been doing some code cleanup or refactoring. That's not very interesting from a user perspective necessarily. It's more like preparing for upcoming changes. One thing I'm looking into is improving writer accessibility as well. There is, for example, some issue with a screen reader called JAWS on Windows, which doesn't reliably read out the paragraph text when you switch to a new paragraph. So that, yeah, improving that kind of depends on quite a lot of other low-level changes I've been doing over the last months. That's one thing. Then the main developer of the Orca screen reader that's used on Linux, John Marie Dix, she has been adding new features to Orca. Structural navigation or browse mode is another word for it, which allows you to navigate from one heading to the next, for example. That's a feature that so far was only implemented in Orca for web browsers, but she made that generally applicable. So it could be used in LibreOffice as well, but that needs some work in both LibreOffice and also the UI toolkits I mentioned earlier. So I've been implementing the so-called ATSBI collection interface in the Qt UI toolkit, because that's one of the preconditions for Orca to be able to make use of that feature, for example, so that the Qt variant of LibreOffice on Linux can use that. That's one of the things that needs to be done. So it's quite a lot of bigger or smaller bits and pieces here and there often, actually.
Right, yeah. And how can people help out and get involved? I guess reporting accessibility issues is one good starting point.
Yes, definitely. So testing, in particular, if you have special needs in a certain way, either you use assistive technology or otherwise, that's always very appreciated if people do provide feedback or if people have ideas on how things can be improved. We also have a mailing list dedicated to accessibility. So if people are interested in the topic, it's great if they join the discussion, bring up topics there. Then, as you mentioned, Bugzilla is our issue tracker, so people can report there, can also help add missing information to existing bug reports or qualify them more. Of course, if there are developers, we are an open source project, so everyone can help improve the software. That's definitely a way. If you're interested in that, feel free to get into contact with me, of course, or the development mailing list as well. If you're not a developer yourself, but you see some issues, for example, there's always the option to fund work as well, to fund some individual or company that has people experienced with LibreOffice development and can help improve the software in that regard.
On Bugzilla, then, is there a special category people can choose for accessibility topics?
There are two things. Like we have keywords. There's an accessibility keyword. So if you want to mark a bug as related to accessibility, you can add that keyword. And then there's also a so-called meta bug. So that's used to group things as well. So if you have a bug and you say this is related to accessibility, you can say the accessibility bug depends on this one. So then you can see, like if you click on that meta bug for accessibility, you can see everything that is related to it. And then it's actually structured a bit more in smaller chunks as well. So that accessibility bug also has like a subcategory or sub bug for issues related to Linux or Windows or Mac OS and certain things. But in general, these are like the two things to collect things like the meta bug and the keyword.
Yeah, we'll put links to
Mhm.
these resources at the bottom of the video as well, underneath the video, or however it's presented as well. But yeah, thanks for that overview, Michael. And yeah, it's really good if people get involved and help us to improve accessibility, because LibreOffice is a huge, complicated piece of software, and we do what we can, but I'm sure there are some dialog boxes somewhere right in the corner of the application that could be improved, that are rarely seen, or yeah, experiences on the platforms as well. There are a million different combinations of operating system and toolkits and updates out there. So the more information we have to improve LibreOffice accessibility, the better. Yeah, great. So thanks, Michael. Thanks for your time and your work. Again, yeah, put the links in the description underneath. And yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, or watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.